Good evening, folks. If I can ask everyone to find a comfortable place to either sit or stand, and we can get started. So welcome, everybody. I just like to just mention His Worship Mayor Brown is in the audience, as well as Councillor McAleer, Councillor Beck, and Councillor McCabe. And my name is Alana Yankoff. I am Chair of the Planning and Heritage Committee, as well as the Deputy Mayor here in Charlottetown. So welcome, everyone, and to the first of our 4 engagement sessions this week. If you want to attend the other 3, there's one tomorrow evening at the Murchison Centre, Wednesday is at the Charlottetown Library Learning Centre, and Thursday is at the Malcolm Darrah Centre, and they all start at 6:30 with a meet and greet, and then followed by the presentation at 7. So we do appreciate you taking the time to come here and learn about the draft official plan. And I will stress, this is only a draft. There is many steps to go, and we are very much excited about the input from the residents, the developers, the community groups. So it's so great to see you all here tonight. It's an exciting moment for the City of Charlottetown, and it's a great opportunity for us all to think about the future and what we want for our communities. I will now hand it over to the consultants from O2 and Upland, who have been spearheading this project for us, and I will turn it over for them to give you the presentation. When it's complete, we'll have open it up to questions. I will ask everyone, if they don't mind, because we do have quite a few people here, if you're able to limit your time to around 5 minutes, and then if there's still time at the end, it would be a great opportunity that you can get back up and speak again. And there's also opportunity for you to email in information, or again, you can attend the other engagement sessions as well. Anyway, I'll turn it over, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. So this evening, we are here to present to you kind of a high-level explanation around the draft official plan for the City of Charlottetown. So just a brief little agenda for the evening. So we'll be giving the presentation shortly. It'll start out with an introduction. We'll have a bit of an engagement overview, which is my wheelhouse. Then we'll go over the draft vision and goals. We'll talk a little bit about the draft subject area policies, which you might have seen a bit on the panels around the room in the back earlier, as well as the draft land use designations. And you'll learn a little bit about how we came to where we are today with the draft official plan. Following the presentation, there'll be a question and answer period. For those of you who maybe aren't so comfortable asking a question in front of the whole room, there will be a number of us at the back of the room who are able to answer your questions directly afterwards as well. So we welcome you to do so. So to get things started, I'll just introduce the consulting project team. So the project is being led by O2, and we've got Rachel Dillon and Chris Hardwick here, as well as Nicholas Kuhl at the back of the room, who are here from Alberta. We also have Upland Planning and Design, which is the firm that I work for. My name's Ryan McLean, by the way. We also have Stefan Koebler, who's one of the partners at Upland, and Paul Detz as well on the project. We were really lucky to be supported in this project by Insight Studio, local marketing and communications team. We had engineering support from CBCL, economics and housing studies done by Turner Drake and Partners, and also heritage consultation by Wendy Shearer. So I'm going to hand things over to Chris, who's going to start off by talking to us a little bit about official plans.
Thanks, Ryan. So first, just a little bit of context. If you haven't noticed, Charlottetown's growing. You know, it's been a long time when Charlottetown's been relatively the same, and in recent years, there's been a lot of growth coming to Charlottetown. And it's important to recognize that along with growth, there comes a lot of benefits. Tax revenue, social diversity, job growth, four-season economy, talent attraction, activity clusters, and improved ability to fund services and amenities. But along with growth, there's also challenges that come, mostly with housing demand, which can increase prices and affordability, availability and choice, and infrastructure pressure. That's all the pipes and roads and things that parks and services that it takes to supply the new growth. So the city has a clear role in these two challenges. One is to enable housing, in which the city can determine densities and design processes that respect the character and protect neighborhoods, and also make sure that the new communities are climate resilient, and also with investment in public infrastructure. So this is where an official plan comes in. The official plan is really the guiding document, the highest level policy, municipal policy in the city, and it integrates all those different topics. If you've seen the boards at the back, all the different topics in one city plan are integrated and help to guide growth. So the official plan, its immediate direction is the zoning bylaw, so it's land use. It informs the zoning, which creates permissions of what you can do on each individual property. It's required by the province, and it needs to be updated every 15 years. So this draft, I don't know if you've looked at it, but it's available online. So it's already been informed by a number of things. One was our first round of engagement, where we came and met with the public and interested groups and learned about all the challenges and opportunities in Charlottetown. And also looking at the existing official plan and looking at things that can remain and are positive for the city, and then gaps and analysis that need to be improved. So through all that, Charlottetown really has two advantages in planning for growth, and one is the 500 lot area, which really is a model to guide growth and protect character in Charlottetown, and can be extended to larger parts of the city. And all other cities that have been growing and experiencing the same challenges, we looked at a whole wide range of best practice that we can bring to help guide Charlottetown's growth. So again, this is draft, underline draft. We should underline draft. What that really means is, you know, it looks complete, right? When you look at it, it looks like it's done. We have to do that to make it look professional and make sure that everyone takes it seriously. But really, this is just one round of engagement, and this is what we're here tonight, to listen to everyone and see what you think of it, or just what your ideas, if you haven't read it yet, what your ideas about change in Charlottetown should be at all. And so nothing's set in stone, and we're here to listen to you tonight. So where are we right now? You can see how we got here. Starting in June 22, we did research and analysis throughout the summer. We were here for engagement in September, October. And then since then, we've been developing the draft plan. So we're here now, March 2023, listening to you. And the goal is to try and refine this draft by April and take it through approvals into the summer. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Ryan to talk about engagement.
Thank you very much. Me again. So we were really fortunate to get to spend some time here, both pre and post Fiona, to talk with folks about their input about kind of their vision for the future of Charlottetown. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of kind of what we heard through that initial phase of consultation. So if you're not aware, there's a project page for this called on the Charlottetown Hall platform. And on that platform, we had a number of 668 page visits, 226 actions, so people can download documents, view videos, things like that. We also had about 42 public survey respondents, which, again, this kind of occurred around the time of Fiona, and so folks kind of had other things on their mind, I think, at this particular moment in time. The online interactive map, however, saw a fair amount of engagement. We had over 500 page views, 184 unique users, and 180 comments on that map. We had 226 online engagement participants through the initial phase of consultation, but we really focused our efforts on in-person engagement and just talking to folks on the street about what they wanted for the future of Charlottetown. So we talked with over 340 people. We also engaged with a number of stakeholder groups and did interviews with about 12 organizations as well. So I'm just going to give you a quick high-level view of kind of what we heard based on these different themes. So the theme that we heard the most about was transportation. The major points were wider public transit access, extended public transit hours were needed in Charlottetown, transportation planning for future developments so that when new buildings go in and when we think about extending development, that transportation is really at the center of that planning as well. Connected active transportation networks, and we also heard from folks about the prospect of there being a bike share program here in Charlottetown. Unsurprisingly, housing was the other hot topic in the initial phase of consultation. And what we heard from folks was primarily to build up and not out, and to use the land that we have in Charlottetown efficiently. We heard about a call to increase density in downtown and along existing transit corridors. We heard folks calling for no more R1 zonings, those large lot single-family home zoning. We also heard about increasing density minimum to 3 units per lot, allowing things like garden suites, so those backyard suites, granny suites some people call them, or in-law suites. Reconsidering parking minimums to promote development in the downtown was also something we heard around supporting housing in the downtown core. Community character is clearly a very important piece of the puzzle here in Charlottetown. People are very proud of the character of Charlottetown. And we heard a lot about smart, strategic approach to density. So taking more of a surgical approach downtown as opposed to a sweeping approach, with more focus on mixed use and adaptive reuse of existing structures. We heard about heritage and density not necessarily being mutually exclusive. We also heard a call for complete communities, which are communities where we can access the things we need in our daily lives easily by walking, and they're close enough to home. We also heard from folks about the desire to see Mi'kmaq and Black history celebrated in the island. And we heard a call for year-round arts and culture offerings, celebrating the diversity of the city. And it was really great because one of the events that we did this at was Farm Day in the City, and it was honestly one of the highlights of my engagement career, talking to folks in Charlottetown. It was really an amazing event. Growth was another topic, obviously, that we heard a lot about, and we're going to hear more later on about that as well. So the things we heard about growth were promoting density, developing brownfield sites, which are previously developed sites, redeveloping large parking lots in East and West Royalty to include housing. So this is mainly your kind of large parking areas around existing malls and shopping centers. Better services for new immigrants. And we also heard about looking for expanded services like recreation to consider the diversity of the population as things have changed. Public space was another topic we heard a lot about. Folks want to see connected green spaces throughout the city. They talked at length about the ones that they currently love and access on a regular basis, and wanting to see connectivity of public spaces, especially on the waterfront. We also heard for a call for some kind of public beach or public boat launch, so people want access to the water. And this is something we hear in communities on the water everywhere. Everyone wants to touch the water. We also heard a fair amount about park design and the fact that any new parks that are designed, folks want to see the neighborhood involved in the design of those parks. And we heard that folks want to see remaining natural areas preserved. Obviously, Fiona was top of mind when we were doing the consultation, and so we heard a lot about climate change in the environment. So folks wanted to see sea level rise and flood risk considered in planning decisions, and that meant, in their minds, limiting waterfront development. We also heard about the desire to see an urban reforestation program post-Fiona. Again, that call for preserving of natural areas. And folks also wanted to see a containing of sprawl and investment in active transportation infrastructure in the city. And another one that we heard from folks was to incorporate a two-eyed seeing approach, so to bring Indigenous worldviews into the decision-making around climate change and the environment, and that we can make better decisions when we marry those views with our Western views as well, that together those things make for better decisions. Another topic we heard a lot about was social equity. So obviously, one of the things we heard most about was enabling affordable housing. So folks want to see support for that. Improving public space and streetscaping in low-income neighborhoods. Investing in spaces and programming that promotes the city's diversity. More barrier-free public events. So again, Farm Day was a really great example of people saying, we want to see more things like this, where everyone can come. And that folks wanted to see more representation and diversity within city staff and government. The local economy was another topic. So promoting that four-season economic opportunities, which I feel like you've done a pretty good job of this year with recent events here in Charlottetown. And folks want to see more of that. They want to see a plan for increased cruise-based tourism. It's a growing industry, and we're seeing more and more folks coming in on cruise ships every year, so there's a desire to see an increase in planning around that. This was one that I heard a lot. So folks want to capitalize on the big city feel and the small town vibe that Charlottetown has, which you do. You have a big city feel and a small town vibe. Folks also want to see streamlined regulations to promote economic development and simplify process for businesses. So an example of this would be, for instance, folks having a hard time navigating something like a signage bylaw for their business and feeling like that was really cumbersome for them to understand how to kind of navigate that document. And then finally, in any land use planning project, we always end up hearing about governance as a theme. So we heard about folks wanting to see continued and increased transparency. We also heard about the desire to see better education and training for staff and council, simplified development processes, and collaboration with all levels of government. So as I mentioned, that was kind of the initial phase of consultation, and now we've moved into this draft phase. So that early phase can sometimes be a little challenging for folks to wrap their heads around when they don't have a tangible document in front of them to comment on. So now we have that tangible document, and we really are open to your feedback and hearing what you think. So we've got a couple different ways for you to share your feedback, both at events through the week here in Charlottetown, but we've also got a public survey available as well. And we've got our online interactive map tool as well. So you'll see that future land use map at the back of the room, and you can provide comments on an online version of that. Both of these are accessible through the project website, which is charlottetownhall.ca/official-plan. You'll see we've got some flyers at the back of the room, so if you do want to take one of those, it has that on it for you. And with that, I will hand things over to kind of the meat and potatoes of the plan. And we'll hand things over to Rachel.
Thank you. So I'd first of all like to start out with saying how grateful we are that you all came out tonight. It's really important to hear the thoughts and reactions and what's working, what's not working with this draft plan from the residents of Charlottetown. So thank you very much. I'll go through a couple sections here. The first is vision and goals. So this draft vision came from the public engagement, and it starts with Charlottetown as a community for everyone. No matter where in the city residents live, all enjoy and benefit from diverse and attainable housing, economic opportunities, accessible and safe transportation choices, beautiful public spaces, and a unique historic culture and charm. Also from the engagement, as well as the background work, are some draft goals, and these are really the line of sight and the North Star to orient the direction of the plan around. So really, they are to grow efficiently, to adapt to climate change, to improve social equity, to be fiscally sustainable, and to ensure environmental sustainability. And these are really cross-cutting goals that hit across multiple subject areas and land use classifications. So the meat of the plan is divided into two big sections. One of them are these subject area policies that I'll provide a high-level overview, and they apply to the city as a whole. The second big section is the land use designation section, which has specific classifications of different land and what can be done there, and my colleague Paul will provide that at the conclusion of the presentation. So there are 9 subject areas, and I will give you a bit of a tour of all of them. So the first two, with urban form, we heard from the engagement that there really was an appreciation for the rigorous design process that currently exists in the 500 lot area, and that there is support for density if it is of a high quality. So building off of that feedback, the draft direction for urban form is to extend this design review process beyond the downtown to other areas experiencing growth, as well as higher density housing. For arts and culture, we heard a lot about how it's critical to the character of the community, and it really supports a more inclusive and welcoming home for people. And the official plan builds upon that by enabling arts and culture innovation, celebrating diversity, promoting year-round programming, and exploring opportunities like microgrants to help facilitate arts and culture further in the city. For heritage, like Ryan mentioned, there's a lot of pride in the heritage preservation of the community, and it's what draws people from all over the world to Charlottetown to experience it for themselves. But as we also heard, there's a desire to celebrate lesser-known Indigenous and Black Islander histories as well. So the official plan's direction is to reinforce and expand the existing heritage inventory, guidelines, and practices more broadly across the community. For recreation, it was really interesting talking to community members that they first really started to notice the tremendous growth that Charlottetown is experiencing when they were going to local facilities in the community and seeing just how much busier they have gotten in recent years, and that there is a need to expand services and consider population diversity. So the official plan picks up on this idea to consider a range of recreational needs to improve their accessibility, equitably distribute them across the city, and expand the trail and pathway network that was really cherished from the people that we spoke to. For housing, like Ryan mentioned, this was a big topic. We talked to a lot of people about housing, either their own housing needs or their children's housing needs or anything they've noticed in the community. And really it was across the board a need for increased housing affordability, supply, density, and choice. So the official plan supports that increased supply, affordability, density, and choice through the various policies within there, both within this section, and Paul will go over in the land use section, but also including support for emergency, community, transitional, and other supportive housing for those most vulnerable in our community. For economic development, like Ryan mentioned, the big city feels small town vibe. We heard a lot in the engagement, and that there needs to be continued support for economic diversity, planning for that increased tourism pressure because people want to come here. How can we accommodate all the visitors that want to see the community? And then explore simpler processes for businesses. So the direction in the draft plan really focuses on remaining open to innovation and maintaining a supply of employment lands and engaging with the business community. Like also Ryan mentioned, there is concern about sea level rise, flooding, storm surges, and the urban forest, particularly post-Fiona. We all saw the impact that had on the community, and it's important to replant and build up that forest again. So the draft plan talks about adapting and mitigating climate change and managing the floodplain through the seawall and resilient buildings. And then the last two, the first is transportation. Also, like Ryan mentioned, that was the most popular topic in the first phase of engagement. And there was a desire for improved transit, pedestrian and cycling service levels. So the plan really stresses the importance of a connected multimodal network for the efficient movement, as well as the efficient movement of goods and people throughout the community. And lastly, servicing. People didn't specifically talk about the underground pipes and water and sewer and energy that make our city work. However, we did hear a lot about building up rather than out, and that's a more efficient use of the infrastructure that we have today, and focusing development in the existing area. So the plan really advocates for a fiscally sustainable approach to servicing that prioritizes increased capacity in the established areas and improved management of stormwater. So that was a rapid tour of the subject areas. I understand it's a lot of content coming at you. If you want to really think and contemplate it further, it's expanded upon in the panels at the back after the session, as well as it's on the website. And we'll also be posting a copy of this presentation to the website as well, charlottetownhall.ca, if you'd like to revisit it after. And I'll now shift to my colleague Paul, who will do the last part of the presentation, the land use.
Thank you, Rachel. So we have heard now on a conceptual level which policies the draft official plan advances. Well, now let's have a look. What do those conceptual level policies actually look like on the ground? So I will be walking you now through the maps, which you already had an opportunity to see entering the room. And yeah, as mentioned previously today, all of the contents are still very much a draft, so same for the maps. You will have now in this engagement period an opportunity to tell us what did we get right and what did we get wrong with these maps. But before we get to that exchange, please allow me for an opportunity to walk you through what were our thoughts and ideas and why have we chosen specific locations for those designations. But before I even get there, I would like to introduce you to an important study that we have been working on as a primer before this official plan. It was called the Charlottetown Growth Management Strategy and was completed last year. And it has some very important insights for how to think about growth and what that means for different designations in the city. So it was mentioned previously, there is unprecedented growth in Charlottetown, or at least unprecedented in the last five or six decades. So we had 12% of growth over the last 10 years. And there are quite a few projections out there what growth may look like over the next 20 to 30 years. But they range from about 14,000 to 20 few thousand of new residents to Charlottetown that may arrive until the period to 2050, 2060. But what they all have in common, none of them are showing a stagnating line or a downward line. They're all consultants that have been previously working on growth projections. They're all showing a steep incline. So it's fairly fair to say that's what we have to prepare for. And specifically in this growth management strategy, we picked one of these scenarios which was kind of in the medium range between all of them, and picked a number from that scenario at 18,032 residents. And we looked spatially, what does it look like when you add 18,032 residents to the city of Charlottetown? Where do they fit in? So on the scenario to the very left, this one here, so everyone online can see it as well. So in this scenario, we have here a lot of growth represented by areas that are showing up in yellow. So those yellow areas, those are representing single family, kind of traditional type suburban growth, single family home subdivisions. And so what you can see from this map, in order to accommodate 18,000 new residents in that way, the current city boundary, which you can see here with the firm outline, doesn't fit those people. You would need to extend the boundary of the city to what's indicated by the dashed line, and that only that way you can fit in that kind of growth to the city. In the second scenario, we approached it a little bit of a different way. So we said, well, if growth doesn't only happen in traditional single-family home suburbs, but actually some of that growth is locating along the main arteries of the city. So University Avenue, St. Peter's Road, you see some dots showing up here in this area that are of blue and navy color. So those dots represent infill growth that is typical mixed use or multi-unit growth. We have taken in that study blocks, street blocks that already exist in the city and kind of multiplied them and filled them in along those corridors. And that way we could tell how many people, how much space do you need to fit in all of those people. And suddenly if you run this approach with some infill growth, those 18,000 people that are expected to arrive in the city, they do fit into the city boundary. And then finally, in the third scenario, we assumed, well, what if some of these greenfield areas that get expanded beyond what's currently built up, what if they're not only single-family homes, but those newly built up areas also include some mixed use and higher density forms? And in that case, you suddenly still have some areas within the city boundary that are preserved as green fields and can be either used for the future or for recreation or ecological purposes, whatever the case may be, right? So what's also really important is to look at the financial implications of these different types of growth. So in every scenario, you accommodate the same amount of people, but the same amount of people, depending on how you distribute them, they create different footprints that needs to be serviced. So here those blue bars, show how many residents in each scenario are added per acre of added footprint to the city. And the orange bars are showing how much additional road is needed in order to service that kind of growth, right? And road doesn't only mean road, it also means water and sewer, and also other services that are provided by other bodies other than the city, such as electricity, power lines, school busing, all of these things. And well, what you often hear as an argument, because we have experience working in growth context in various cities and municipalities, sometimes you hear, well, but all of these additional, suburban homes they pay taxes and they add a lot of tax assessment. And yes, it's true, like every form of development adds to the tax base of a city, right? And you can see that represented by these blue bars on the bottom right chart. It doesn't really matter which growth scenario you take. The overall addition to the tax base of the city is more or less the same with minor differences. But what really changes is the cost and how much road and services you need to provide for that, which is then represented by the orange bars. And so if you calculate the cost that it takes for such a road, for new subdivisions that add up over time, then the following picture emerges. So what's important to consider is normally the way it works with current subdivision practices in the city is that when new areas are added to the city, the developer, first of all, comes up with the upfront cost of creating the streets, putting in all the infrastructure, bringing municipal water and sewer up to standard. So it kind of seems like for the city, it is free infrastructure that comes with a lot of value. The thing is, what the city has to do in exchange for that is take on responsibility for ownership and maintenance of all of that infrastructure. So on average, Statistics Canada has determined that a local road in PEI lasts for about 23 years. So after that period of time, it needs to be completely recapitalized, repaved. And then there is all of the ongoing maintenance that you have every year for the road network. So every additional meter of road that you're creating requires plowing, requires patching of potholes, and everything, that cleaning and so on. So adding up all of that cost, the first scenario that we presented, adding 18,000 residents to the city and distributing them all in new suburban areas, at the end of the day, when you add up all the cost and compare just the cost for road reconstruction and maintenance to the tax revenue that you'd be presumably getting from that type of development, is you only get about $3.4 million into the city budgets per year from that type of development. Now imagine, so you add 18,000 people, you get about 3.4 million of additional tax revenue from that for the city. And that is only the equation after taking away all the road maintenance cost and road recapitalization cost. What about water and sewer, all the parks and recreation needs that this additional population is creating, administration in the city, garbage pickups, like a lot of things, cost factors that scale with the population growth here are not considered. So in practice, once you would do the full cost accounting for all of that, and that is not unique to Charlottetown. It pretty much happens anywhere for any town, city in North America. You can make that calculation. With single-family suburban growth, what ends up happening is that existing property owners are in the long term subsidizing those kind of extensions. And this is something very important to keep in mind for when we think, how do we deal with the growth scenario that we're currently having in Charlottetown? So let me walk you through the designations that we have identified and that are presented in the future land use map, which is part and parcel of this official plan. Well, first of all, the downtown. And downtown is obviously a very important part of the city for cultural reasons, for recreational reasons. It is this hub of activity. A lot of good policies have already been written in the past for the downtown, so there's no need for this official plan to reinvent the wheel, but it's essentially carrying forward all the good policies that have been written for the downtown in the past and just tweaking them, bringing them up to date. But yeah, what we're looking at for is to maintain and nurture this strong role of the downtown as a hub for various activities, residential, commercial. Keep it compact, keep it the way it is, prioritize walking and cycling in those areas to prevent too much traffic buildup, and of course, have a very close look at heritage by using a design review process, which the city is already applying for development in that area. Then the largest amount of space in the city is taken up by a designation we call neighborhoods. So neighborhoods are all of your existing subdivisions. For instance, whether it's Sherwood or parts of West Royalty or Winslow. So those are already existing, established neighborhood areas, which we don't want to see disrupted with this plan. However, they can also make a contribution to absorb some of that population growth so we don't have these pressures to grow the city outside. So that can be, for instance, accomplished by the previously mentioned secondary suites, so-called granny suites, garage suites, all of these, up to 3 units per lot. That should be permitted. And even though that's a very low density form of development, if they can be added to a lot of properties in this vast area, it can also make a significant contribution to create more housing for the growing population. What we also focus on in these areas, and that speaks to some of these complete community policies that were mentioned earlier in the presentation, is we want to see these neighborhoods grow as complete communities where people can live their whole lifespan in, have options to downsize, when they're at a stage in their life when they don't want to take care of a large property anymore. And to have services and amenities nearby. So some small-scale commercial developments such as corner stores would also be encouraged within that neighborhood designation. So we know that a lot of growth is coming. We just talked about how growing outwards is not a very good case for planning for the future of the city. And most of the areas in Charlottetown are very established neighborhoods where it's difficult to introduce a lot of growth. Where else can we actually grow, right? Where can we accommodate those 15 to 20,000 people which are expected to be added? Well, what we have identified as a prime opportunity for that kind of growth are your corridors. So that is, for instance, here, University Avenue, St. Peter's Road, Brackley Point Road, then after St. Peter's reading to East Royalty Road, as well as Belvedere Avenue, Allen Street. Those are the main corridors where we feel, there is already a lot of traffic on these roads, which mostly stems from people getting in and out the city or getting into, from the outer parts of the city to downtown. So adding density to those corridors doesn't fundamentally change the situation of transportation on those corridors. And at the same time, creating these corridors as denser, mixed-use areas helps improving the transportation facilities, and particularly transit, which was mentioned so often in the first round of engagement, and where we heard a lot of need to improve transportation policies around that. And it brings people and services closer. So a lot of newcomers have the opportunity to settle in an area like that, be close to amenities, and have less of a need for driving. And so these areas we have designated in the plan as being capable of absorbing developments up to 6 stories. So that is the idea that in the long term, also after the future zoning bylaw is amended to be brought in line with the new official plan, that those areas would support developments up to 6 stories, and that actually low-density developments such as single-family homes wouldn't be allowed on those big streets in order to make good use of the resource of that land to accommodate more people. And key areas of these corridors are where 2 corridors intersect. So for instance, in areas like the intersection between Belvedere Avenue and University Ave, or around the Charlottetown Mall. So those are the areas that could really create new alternatives to the downtown. So, to have areas that provide a dense mix of land uses, some shopping, restaurants, but also a lot of residences nearby, so that not everyone that wants to have that kind of thriving cultural and vibrant environment needs to always go to the downtown, but that there would also be alternatives closer to where people live further north in the city to have that kind of environment in there. There are also, these intersections are prime locations to co-locate transit terminals, bike sharing, car sharing, and so on. So we feel those areas, they also don't have any heritage context as opposed to the downtown. So we feel this is where most of the density could be absorbed, regularly up to 8 stories. And through the design review process, which is a process of the city where a board and architects look very closely at proposals, and if the design is beneficial to the public, also proposals with more stories could be considered in these areas. Urban expansion, so those are the greenfield areas. So we just have seen in the summary of the growth management strategy why it's not good use of taxpayers' money to keep growing outwards in that way. So those areas are in the urban expansion designation, and they can only be developed with city streets and services if there is a really strong case that there are good for the overall public benefit, right? For instance, if the land is well utilized, there is a wide variety of housing that is being provided in the area, and council feels that this really adds to the public benefit, then the urban expansion areas could be developed by using secondary plans that very much in detail plan out what the development will look like. And a couple of other designations that I haven't been speaking about yet, but which are on the future land use map, just to complete the picture. So there's, for instance, the workscapes designation, which are your business parks, essentially. Those are areas where you have some industry, where it's sometimes a little louder, where you have a lot of heavy truck traffic pulling in and out. So those areas don't really mix well with general commercial or residential areas. But there is a need for a growing city like Charlottetown. There is also a growing need for industrial lands. So you need to keep some of them aside for that kind of development. So that's happening around the airport, in the exhibition drive area is the airport, also closer to the gateway area, closer to Cornwall. Then we have also other designations include parks and public spaces. So those are publicly owned open spaces for the most part, which are used by the city for recreational purposes. So they deserve a separate designation to be considered and protected. Same for natural spaces, which are important for ecological reasons. Those also need to be earmarked in a special category. So we have the natural areas designation for that. And the institutional designation covers all of your kind of publicly owned nonprofit organizations as well as universities. So those are those nonprofit employers and service providers which are needed in the city. So for those, the best planning can do is just provide as little rules and restrictions as possible so these institutions can flourish and good things can happen there. And that covers, all of the designations that we have built up as part of the considerations of the engagement, as part of the conceptual policies. And that closes up my presentation. And I think we still have a couple of words on where we'll go from here.
Thank you, Paul. So next steps for the project. We've got more ways for you to share your feedback. Again, you can write your comments on the panels here today. We've also got the postcards at the back as well, where you can leave topic-specific comments there. You can take the public survey, which also outlines a lot of these high-level policies and just asks for your level of support on them and provides you with an open-ended opportunity to provide your comment as well. So you don't have to read the entire plan in order to take the public survey. Hot tip. And then you can also leave us a comment on the online interactive map, which is a great opportunity to comment more directly on that future land use map that Paul's just walked us through with those designations. So again, the project website is www.charlottetownhall.ca/official-plan. And now we're going to move into the question and answer period of the evening. So again, just a few little comments to kind of get us started here. We're here to listen to you. So like we've mentioned, this is a capital D draft, so nothing is set in stone, and we're very much open to hearing all comments. All opinions are welcome. We invite difference here and are open to hearing all perspectives. So please keep comments and questions respectful, but we are really going to just open the floor now to anyone who wants to come up to the mic and ask a question. I'm going to hand things over to the mayor for a moment.
Ryan, I just want to thank you for the presentation, and thanks for the deputy mayor for opening up this first public meeting. Great to see a good turnout. But please, if I'm assuming that Ryan is going to chair the meeting, if you just give your name and your place. It doesn't have to be an address. It could be Charlottetown, Spring Park, wherever, but we like to get the names documented so that we do have a public record. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So you can feel free to come to the mic if you do have a question or comment that you want to share. And yeah, we're opening the floor. So if there are any questions, or did we do such a good job that no one has any questions? Oh. No, that's great.
Yeah.
Open us up.
Is this on?
Oh, yes, it is.
My name's Kane Arsnow. I'm a resident of West Royalty. I work for a local real estate company and developer. earlier on in your presentation, you mentioned regarding the downtown core, the policies behind it and how there's little change coming to those. Is there a point where the policies can stay, but are we getting to a point where we can now look at the regulations, the rules down there? Because if you believe the policies are correct and doing well, the question is, why is there very little development down there? You can read in the current 500 lot guidelines, it's somewhat ambiguous in the sense that there's, in our current official plans like that as well, there's a lot of reference to, heritage preservation shouldn't impede, development and modernization of the downtown core, yet you get to some areas and we're only allowed to build 3 stories. You can have a 3-story building at 39 feet with a mansard roof, yet we can't build a 4-story at 43 feet, which really in scale, there's no difference, but it allows a developer to get that much more density. So the policies to us do need to be looked at downtown. To us, there's 3 key things that need to be looked at. Height, parking requirements, which you didn't really get into, but perhaps that's not at a policy level, but more of a regulation level. One thing you did mention that we're strongly would like to consider is the application process. It's quite long, hard, difficult, arduous. You begin with the design review process. That goes to a design review committee. They judge it. Then it goes to the planning board committee. They judge it, decide, okay, this will go to a public meeting. Then it has to go to the public meeting. Comments are taken. Then it goes back to the planning board committee. They make their suggestion, then it goes to council. There just seems to be, the process seems to be very long. If you're going to implement a design review process and you're going to get that opinion from professional architects and planners who are supportive of these projects, then you take it to a public consultation, public meeting, and you let the public micromanage the process from there. What's the point of the design review process? You've talked to a professional. He said, this qualifies, this is nice for your downtown, yet you go to the public and you say, well, no, what do they have to say? Forget what he said. So I guess my question is this policy, these policies we're looking at here, they're broad, it's a broad document. Are we at some point going to look at how the bylaws relate to these and what can change there? Alex? Will the bylaws be changing?
So that is, I'll hand things over to Paul to kind of talk a little bit more about that. Are you?
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Yeah, so as you're aware, there are 2 levels of documents that define the rules around development in the city. On the higher policy level is the official plan, and then there is the zoning and development bylaw that implements plan policies. You have to start somewhere, and this project is about updating the official plan. Every municipality always has to also bring up to date, their zoning bylaw up to date. So I don't think there is a clear timeline on when exactly the zoning bylaw will be updated, but it's very much the intention to do that as the follow-up project after the official plan review is completed.
So is the intention to induce development in the downtown core, or is it not? Sorry, I was a little short there. Again, as I said, it seems that and I'm not pointing my finger at you or anyone, there seems to be, certain aspects where we're saying one thing, but only allowing another. So, as I said, is development going to start being encouraged in the downtown core?
The priority of this plan is to, induce the biggest changes to what is permitted as of right in the corridor and the nodes. This is what we see as the most suitable locations to absorb the population growth. For one, because of their more suitable location with regard to the transportation network, and secondly, because they don't have a heritage context, these areas, or at least, not in such a condensed form as in the downtown. So those are the priority areas where we want to encourage more growth. There are options for growth in the downtown. And perhaps, and I mean, we can follow up on that also later on, perhaps some of those problems are more, as you said, in the operational rules of the zoning bylaw than they are in the large policies itself, right? So this is something that will need to be looked closer in the zoning bylaw review.
So why do you feel that the corridors and the nodes are the more important places to introduce density?
Yeah, because there's
not the downtown, but these other areas.
Because there's just such a vast opportunity, right? There are so many underutilized sites on these corridors when you drive through them.
And I agree. I agree with you. I'm actually I applaud you for bringing this forth with this. My question, and he's nodding. My question keeps remaining. Are we going to do nothing to bring growth and vitality to the downtown?
Yeah, I think we need to look closer on which obstacles exactly you're seeing to development in the downtown. And it's a draft. We're happy to take that feedback, and we look forward to hearing more in detail where you see the problems right now to develop in the downtown.
Okay, thank you. And in these corridors and nodes, as well as the downtown, which is our belief should be brought up and grown, is there going to be any incentives to developers to invest in these areas? Has that been considered?
In the corridors and nodes?
Yes, and in the downtown as well.
Not in the current draft of the plan. If you have any good ideas for what kind of incentives would be helpful for development, please write us emails, fill in some cards. We're happy to hear what you think would work well. So
with these corridors and transportation modes being in the major routes of public transportation, do you see that we now have the ability to start reducing parking requirements for developments? Especially, looking at some of the other points in your presentation about global warming, that sort of thing. I know in other municipalities there's encouragements to not provide as much parking.
I do think we have policies in the plan that encourage in the future zoning bylaw review to reduce parking requirements. Yes, I mean the policies around prioritizing walking and biking in the downtown, trying to build more complete communities, those policies support reductions of parking requirements. It just, how exactly this will work will need to be further evaluated when reviewing the bylaw.
I feel like you might have some particularly good points to kind of pass along to us, so I would really like to connect with you after the meeting as well to kind of set up some time for us to do that.
All right, sure.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments?
Hi.
Hi.
My name's David Toombs. I live in Charlottetown. I'm just wondering, I was watching your plan and you're talking about 18,000 more people in the future coming in, and the focus is on economic development in the downtown core is one of the focuses. But I'm just wondering, for economic development in Charlottetown, really the main businesses are government and tourism. So if there's economic development in the downtown core, I'm just wondering, is there a plan that you would have for where all the tourists that would be coming in here, where do they stay? Because I know I'm in the tourism business. I've been in the tourism business for all my life, like 30 years I've been in it. I've lived in Charlottetown a long time. I'm in the tourist business in Charlottetown for a while yet, not knowing how long I'm going to be in here, but I'm in for the next 10 days anyway. But I'm just wondering, is there a plan, like with a lot of the, it seems like anybody in the a lot of people in the accommodation business in Charlottetown, it almost seems like we're the #1 enemy for causing the housing problem. You know, everything that's wrong in housing in downtown Charlottetown, it seems to be coming back to us. I'm just wondering, is there a plan to, where are we going to put all the people coming into the downtown core that want to stay there in the summer? Is there a plan for more hotels, or, because in the last few years it's been overrun with tourism. There's been no places to stay, and with, you know, over 100 or 150 units shutting down, I'm just wondering, is there another plan to where are we going to put everybody?
Hello? Okay,
Hi.
it's turned on. Thank you for that question. The official plan is quite high level, and it doesn't call out accommodation uses specifically, but it does talk about the increasing tourism industry that's growing extensively. And I think the latest figure I heard was 1.5 million pre-COVID, so it's a huge economic driver for Charlottetown, no doubt. So the current policies, and I would love to chat with you a bit further about if there's any amendments that we can make to the current draft specifically, but it does about focus on working with the tourism industry professionals about how we can support it and how we can accommodate the scale of visitation to the downtown. And it's really focusing on partnerships and further conversations and further strategic work to dive into it, but nothing super specific. But it does still enable like hotels and services and like that.
So where would you plan to put the hotels? I'm just asking, it's a
Yeah.
500 lot, and it seems like development in the downtown is basically being shut down because there's no opportunity for a return. If we want to, like, personally, we've renovated 4 or 5 properties over the last 7 or 8 years. We were, you know, heroes at the start. Oh my God, we're fixing up old buildings and renovating them, and there was no mention of being shut down under the, you know, we were helping tourism, but now I'm just wondering, like, I know we're going to disappear, but I'm wondering, this is an official plan. Charlottetown's is a tourism city, and there's never been a question asked, where are the tourists going to stay? I'm just asking, and it's a pretty simple question for downtown.
Yeah.
Is there a plan for, Alex, is there a plan for more hotels downtown in the 500 lot core? That's what we got for the last year, the same answer as that, so.
Yeah,
anyway.
Thank you for that. And it's a great question.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that it's an ideal question to raise right now while we're still in the draft
Sorry
plan.
when I'm a little mad, but
No, I'm really happy that
it's
you did.
emotional for me because it's my livelihood that's being fiddled with, so.
Absolutely.
And you know, I'm gone, but there's no strategy going forward. So where do we put everybody that we want to welcome our visitors? Where do they go? Anyway, I just like to put that on the plan. Like, have you talked to anybody in tourism as far as economic development downtown? Is there a plan for that?
In the first phase of engagement, I think there was some meetings. Ryan can go into more detail about who within the tourism.
Yeah, I mean, we did speak with the Tourism Association of Prince Edward Island to talk a bit about kind of the tourism industry and the fact that especially you are seeing, we talked to the port as well about the rising growth that's happening in the cruise ship business.
Right.
So that is something that we definitely did hear quite a bit about. in terms of kind of,
Accommodations?
yeah, I mean, all of those things have come up, most definitely. And so really, when it comes to the actual direction, like much to what, Rachel said, it's pretty high level on this end with the official plan, and ultimately too, it's hard when it comes to, with land use planning, we make decisions around how, designations and things like that, but it's up to the market really to respond in a lot of ways as well. And so there are some things that we can help to push, but others that we can't necessarily.
Well, we appreciate your help. I would appreciate some help.
Yeah, thank
Put
you
it
so
on your
much for your
notes.
comments, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the room? Come on up.
Glad to see what you're doing here. Hi, my name's David Mall. I have about 100 acres of undeveloped land within the city limits, so I do have an oar in the water here, but I'm not really here to talk about that. I did not really see anything in this plan which was going to make the person decide whether they should live in Charlottetown or in Winslow or in Hunter River or whatever, and come to work in Charlottetown and make it easier for them. We have basically 4 parallel roads that run out to Lower Malpeque Highway 2, Sherwood Road, and the Brackley. I'm really surprised that I don't see anything on the plans there that would extend the Sherwood Road out to the Royalty Junction Road, which would allow traffic to carry on that road and keep, instead of bunching it up at the intersection by the Atlantic Cat. And people could run out, come out to Brackley Point Road, or they could come out onto the Winslow Road. That would also cut down on the traffic at the intersection, which is a nasty one, by the service station in Winslow, just as you come up over the hill. The Lower Malpeque Road is underutilized, in my opinion. I've seen traffic backed up there past Fox Run, trying to get out on Highway 2. If we've got a roundabout left somewhere in the warehouse somewhere, let's think about something like that. But what I'm really here to talk about is the waterfront. I was quite disappointed not to see any amount of planning in really, and when I'm talking waterfront, I'm talking about that beautiful harbor we have here. I had occasion last week down in Mexico to speak to a couple who had been on a cruise here this past fall, an elderly couple who mobility-wise probably had some issues in walking great distances. And I talked to them about Charlottetown, and they said, lovely city, but they said, we really didn't learn a lot about the history in Charlottetown. There wasn't a lot of things for us to find about the history of the island here. They weren't on a tour. They didn't take tours somewhere. They tend to walk around and absorb the history of the city. And I thought about that, and I said, yeah, okay, that. As we get up to the 100 cruise ship range, we really, like the Founders Hall thing was maybe way ahead of its time before we had a cruise ship industry. Now that option's really not there to develop some sort of a museum, a cultural museum. When we went to Pearl Harbor a number of years ago, the first thing that took our interest was, before we went on the tour, is we went through a museum, a history. We spent more time in there and learned more and came back to that a second time, as opposed to walking on the Missouri and seeing some of those sites. We really don't have that here. We have a beautiful harbor. Boats go out and race a couple times a week. But if we want a beach, we'll take 100,000 tons of sand and we'll dump it in front of, off opposite street from the Lieutenant Governor's house, and that just there. Maybe the citizens on West Street won't be too happy, but look at the trouble we had trying to get a little pier dock out there to, for people to dock their kayaks. There's a whole stretch along the park there that is underutilized, totally underutilized from the point of view of both, and I'm not talking about the local residents who walk their dogs there, I'm talking about a bigger population outside the city to come down and enjoy that Victoria Park area. That's so underutilized. I'd like to see some concern about that. The other point we have to remember, Charlottetown's a capital city. It's also the center of trade and commerce. The aggregate has to come into Charlottetown. There's really not much choice there. Fertilizer, our oil, all that dependency. And we've been bunting the marinas around. You know, we've got the one marina squeezed in now between the two cruise ships trying to get in and out. So we're not developing that. We need, I think, a longer-term plan that looks at how we can use that beautiful harbor that we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Great
you.
comments. Anyone else have any questions or comments that you'd like to raise? We're starting a lineup.
My name is Jerry Wolfrey. I'm a resident of West Royalty. I live in a residential neighborhood, and my concern is about traffic and incompatible land use. We've been dealing with this in our neighborhood for the past few years without success. And so commercial development, for example, 8-story apartment buildings, will your plan provide any guidance to the city with respect to the traffic flow of commercial traffic and or multi-unit residential traffic through residential neighborhoods? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody? Paul?
So traffic management and transportation infrastructure, that's how to build out the infrastructure in the future is something that's covered in the growth management strategy document, which is can be downloaded on charlottetownhall.ca. The official plan itself doesn't have concrete recommendations as to this road needs to be upgraded or there need to be additional lanes or anything like that. So this is all something that's covered by the growth management strategy. You see you have a follow-up. I'll just wait.
No, just clarification. Maybe I'm thinking more in terms of land use buffers.
Yeah, so if you live within the neighborhoods designation, right, which sounds like you're somewhere in a quiet, established neighborhood, so that designation would not encourage or permit any, large commercial developments, 8 stories, anything like that. So those in the plan are to be directed to the main roads directly, right?
Yeah. What I'm saying is I'd like to see something in your plan to provide guidance to Mr. Forbes and others when they're drafting the new development bylaws that addresses the issue of land use buffers and the flow of commercial traffic, incompatible traffic through residential neighborhoods where children are standing on the bus stop, walking back and forth to school, etc.
Okay, so you're saying to create buffers between a main corridor area and a neighborhood.
Yes, so all that traffic essentially doesn't use our neighborhood as a point of ingress and egress.
Okay, you want to answer?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question, and some of the other questions are also touching on the details and studies and land use zoning regulations, dimensions of buildings, parking requirements. Those are all follow-up studies and bylaw implementations that will take place. And just to share, our experience from Halifax, if maybe I can get a raise of hands who's been to Halifax in the last 3 to 5 years. About half the room, I would say. So for those of you who haven't seen the change in downtown Halifax and downtown Dartmouth in the last few years, there's been a lot of development. a lot of intensification, mostly along corridors. And as you say, that those increased densities brought an increased influx of people, demand on roads, on transit, and so on. So what created that growth in downtown Halifax, downtown Dartmouth, was a high-level policy document called the Center Plan that's similar to this official plan. As the main guiding tool for the city, what followed then were things like neighborhood traffic calming and upgrades of corridor roads, balancing modes of transportation so that cars and transit and cycling had an equal, were more equal than previously, and so on. So those things are being dealt with in the future. They're not the high-level policies of the official plan set the tone for those changes.
My fear is that if you don't include it in your official plan, which is a guiding principles and theories and whatnot for the development people to do their drafting, then it won't end up in there. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know we had another one lined up.
Good evening. My name is Kyle Blood. I'm a small business owner in downtown Charlottetown in the 500 block, actually. So thank you for this. It's a very daunting task to plan the next 20 years of Charlottetown. So I have 3 questions. One I saw online, I did read through the plan over the weekend. When this was first done back in the 90s, it took 5 years to get from conception to implementation. This is being presented as a 1-year span. That seems short to me, if the first one took 5 years. So that's my first question. Is it possible that this would take longer? You really think this can be done in a year? There's so many questions.
Anyone want to take that one?
Well, I think partially it depends on the feedback we receive on this plan now, right? If we feel that we're already pretty close to something that most can agree on, we should move forward with, then we can realistically wrap it up fairly soon, right? If there is like a lot of need for revisiting, looking further at some of the items, then that would be something that potentially could cause delays. But no, like the goal is to definitely have a new plan in place this year.
And to that point, you spoke to a number of people back in September, October, which was not an opportune time, we all know, to get input. Right now on the island is actually not an opportune time either, unfortunately, not your fault. We have a provincial election going on. People are pretty tied up for that. So who are the stakeholders you have spoken to? Actually, what is a stakeholder?
So stakeholders are, especially in an initial phase of consultation, it's really about people who can kind of speak to issues in the public realm. So a lot of the time, we talk to people in tourism, we talk to people representing, particular, like we talk to Sport PEI, for instance. We talk to the tourism folks, we talk to the Black Cultural Association, we talk to Elmway, we talk to a number of different organizations, the CADC, the Confederation Center.
Sure. Did you speak to hospitality industry professionals such as Dave? Did you speak to the Architects Association? And if you didn't, that's fine. But how do we make sure that going forward, we have a week basically, you're going to be here, to get those stakeholders' voices heard?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it's one of the things that, is always challenging, because in my experience as an engagement professional, there is never necessarily a great time to hold engagement. We try to reach as many people as possible, and in the initial phase of consultation, the kind of effort was really put into those pop-up events, because we really wanted to hear from people who otherwise, when you post a meeting notice like this, aren't always going to come. You want to get all kinds of different. So we talked to bus drivers, we talked to taxi drivers, we spoke to servers, we talked to people who were, in the community, and we heard a lot about, the various challenges that we outlined in the What We Heard report section. But you're right, there's never enough time to speak to absolutely everyone. we do, again, there's multiple opportunities for people to kind of try to submit their feedback through this process now. These are the in-person engagements. The online ones will be open for a few weeks after this as well. And then there's always, this is not actually the last possible opportunity as well, because there is a public process in plan adoption as well. So there's another opportunity when things go for adoption. There is a public process for people to be able to participate again at that time if they feel their interests haven't been sufficiently addressed.
Also last week, the Confederation Center announced a $65 million Phase 1 plan for basically what is 1/4 of their building. It has 4 sides, 1/4 of it was discussed. Have you liaised at all with the Confed Center?
We have. I spoke to Steve directly, the GM of the Confederation Center.
Steve Bellamy?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I spoke to him in the initial consultation phase. He was someone that I directly interviewed.
And what were your findings as to what their proposal is vis-a-vis what you're seeing as a need for arts and heritage, culture, and development? I'm not seeing anything directly linked, but there must be a backstory there.
I mean, that's a good question. Honestly, it's been many months since I had that conversation. So, the direct, exact elements of our conversation, there were still some things that were also in flux at the time. Like they were talking about what they were going to do with the additional space in the Confed Center, that there is this, arts programming space that they're looking to kind of continue to develop with the moving out of, I believe it was part of
The library moved
Yes,
out.
the library, exactly.
Yes.
That's moved in across the street. So yeah, I mean, you raise a good point. I'm hoping, that Steve will provide us with some comments on the draft plan and let us know if, he sees room for improvement.
Well, I think the challenge with Charlottetown, especially, having lived in a number of other cities in my lifetime, is that we are a capital city, and we're a city, and we have a local government. So you have 3 levels of government working at the same, in one very, very small place.
Yes.
And everybody's always trying to do their best. But if this is to really fly, I think you really need to do your due process with institutions like the Confederation Center. Like, sit down this week and have a conversation with them, because you can't implement a 20-year plan without knowing what our major arts and cultural institution is doing trying to do for the next 25 years as well, or 50 years. So,
Yeah, thank you.
thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Chris. I live in West Raleigh. Just have a question around your engagement process, your online engagement, the survey, just because your numbers seem low of engagement of online versus, how many people actually live in the city of Charlotte, how many people are concerned with the city of Charlotte. So what steps have you done to kind of boost stuff to kind of get it out there, just curiosity's sake?
Yeah, great question. So we worked with Insight because of the fact that, whenever you're working in a community, I'm not from Charlottetown, so I don't necessarily know the best way. So we worked with Insight to, use their kind of local knowledge to help get the word out. And so, when it came to advertising, there was in the paper, they did radio ads, also social media as well was used. Now, you're right that the numbers for the survey
Yeah,
were...
because you're only seeing 668 pages viewed. That's people who viewed the page.
Yes.
So that's very low. Would it have anything to do with maybe it's not branded to the city of Charlottetown? Like it's Charlottetown, was it Charlottetown Town Hall or something?
Charlottetown Hall. So it
Charlottetown Hall, but
It is a new engagement platform that the city's
but there's
using.
no City of Charlottetown logo on it.
Because the
right?
branding for
so
the city
like in the
Charlottetown
top left
Hall
is
different. Yep, you're correct.
So
that it is
there's no
different.
branding to know that this is coming to Charlottetown, right? So I think maybe a step, just looking at your engagement numbers, it's
Yeah.
low. Boost it and say this is coming from the city of Charlotte. This is coming from Alex Forbes. We're doing this for the city of Charlottetown,
Yeah.
not just because really it's
That's-
not clear. It's
Yeah.
not clear. You have to go looking for it. Even if you Google Charlottetown Town Hall, you can't even find this site. So on my way here, I'm trying to Google, get information, can't get information. So that's a problem right there.
Yeah, that's a really good
So-
point with the branding, particularly that sometimes we can get carried away with developing new brands that we sometimes miss out on
So
being able to.
I think your engagement numbers coming from the online community. You're this far down this rabbit hole. You're just starting to talk to people in person. You know, as to the previous gentleman's comments, not much engagement. There's 30 people here. People may not know about it, that kind of stuff. I know you're trying your best, but we need to have some branding around the city of Charlottetown so that people know it's for them.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah,
I do appreciate that. And, you know, you're right that the online engagement numbers were low in the early engagement also. And I will say that typically as well with land use planning projects, it can be really hard to get people to engage with them.
People need to know the implications of
Yeah, no, 100%.
for guiding for the next 20 years.
100%. Thank you very much.
Hi,
Hi.
John McAleer, resident of West Rowley and city councillor for Ward 7. Just on your engagement, it says the 26 stakeholder groups, and you referenced some of them earlier. I just wondered with some of the developers, like the Gray groups, the APMs, the Arsenault brothers, the Bevan groups, were any of those groups consulted as part of your engagement?
So on the initial phase of engagement, we did not engage with those groups. We are hoping to get their feedback on this round of engagement when there is actually a tangible draft document for them to comment on. Some of the criticisms that come in initial consultations when it comes to, you know, overly consulting the development community early on is that people think that the plan then is dictated by the development community, and really the initial phase of consultation was really a public focus to get that kind of big high-level vision and goals for the community. And then out of this next phase, out of this draft phase, we're really hoping to hear more from the development community in this phase to kind of get your direct feedback on the plan.
So on that communication, will that be inbound or outbound from their point of view? Will you reach out to them, or do they expect that they'll reach out?
I have reached out to a number of those, actually all of them that you listed there,
Right.
to schedule direct interviews with them to get their direct feedback on the plan.
So that's pending?
That is pending, correct.
Wonderful.
We do have a few set up for this week while we're here, but we're hoping to get more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I've got another one.
Hi, my name is Craig Solis, and I live in West Royalty. Just have a couple comments here. Going to make it easy on you. Not going to look for any answers here. It's more of some comments and food for thought, but I do want it on the record. First of all, thank you for everyone involved, whether you're on the panel or in the audience or whatever. My hope is that in the future our city will just be a better place. It's a fantastic city. I've been to many across Canada and the United States, wherever, for work and professional reasons and for personal reasons. But just a couple comments. First of all, I'd like to, we're talking about a plan here, and I'd like to back up about the process. How are we going to achieve this? And I'm going to take this to a little higher level. And I should say, I've got 3 points here to make. I'll make them quickly, but I did mention them in our last municipal election when candidates came around to my house. I mentioned this to every one of them. It's the same 3 things. Number one, and it's in regard to process and how we achieve success. And I think the ward system in Charlottetown is flawed. You showed in one of your earlier slides a number of studies that were done, and maybe this has been done in the past, and I'm just not aware of it. But I would like to see a study to give residents a little bit more information if an open ward system would be better for Charlottetown. Rather than right now, I feel that at times there are councillors that can hold up the process for an extended period of time because it doesn't fit what they want or what they feel their ward wants. So for those that aren't familiar with an open system, and maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding is if we've got 10 councillors in 10 councillor positions in Charlottetown, 20 people run, I get to vote for 10. That way they're representing all of the city and not just their ward. Again, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't expect you to have it. But I think it would benefit the City of Charlottetown to have a study done on that. The second thing is, and this is kind of my own, the fire station. Talk about all this development. We need, and it's already been documented, I won't get into it too deeply here, but we need a fire station in the north end of this city sooner rather than later, and regardless of the cost. So that's number two. And number three, gentleman prior to me mentioned the Charlottetown Harbor. It's a beautiful harbor. I can't think of another harbor any nicer. No heavy industry, very little, and beautiful harbor, and lots of potential. But we have no dumping station on that harbor waterfront. The marinas are getting busier. More and more people are getting boats. I have a boat there myself. It's just a little pontoon boat. There's no washroom on it. My family, we use the washroom at the little restaurant, the Cork and Cast, or at Peaks Quay. We use the washrooms there. But there's no washrooms down there. And more of those boats have washrooms on them and no place to dump them. Does that make any sense whatsoever? Yes. I mean, would you allow a campground in the city without a dumping station? I don't think so. So where are those boats dumping those toilets? I won't get into it, but what I power wash off the bottom of my boat in the fall is not nice.
Yes, this could go into TMI.
Yeah. So, but anyway, and just the whole waterfront, we don't have enough public washrooms on the waterfront. We have restaurants down there that are trying to do business that are limited in their ability to do business because of the lack of washrooms. The public are walking around wondering where they can find a washroom. Now, there are a couple down there, but I think we could use more. And I know it's a big cost, and no one wants to operate washrooms, but they're badly needed for our tourists. So I think all this relates to all the comments that were presented before me. So I think that's about all I had. So anyway, thank you again for everyone's work.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Any final questions before we go? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Phil Ferrero. I live in Charlottetown. I didn't realize this started at 6:45, so I came in late. I don't know if you had a presentation ahead of time that I may have missed. So I have some questions that you may have already addressed or maybe not. But the overlying question, I guess, is from what I've heard, there seems to be this underlying assumption that we're going to have continued development. So the overlying question is, how much development is enough? Okay. And in that idea of development, have you considered a green belt around the city in order to stop sprawl? And with the idea of a green belt, have you considered wildlife corridors going through the city, not just for public parks, but for also wildlife migrations? There's a major development, I understand, planned for Hillsborough that, if it goes ahead conventionally, could mean upwards of 1,000 more cars in the Charlottetown area. Have you considered developments that would be designed to be car-free? There's been numerous examples around the world, and I could send you a listing of a whole bunch of them. It's not such a unique idea. Within the city, the City Council and Maritime Electric have made efforts to have all the street lights switched over to LED lighting. The LED lighting that they use is a very intense white-blue light that the American Medical Association has talked about how incredibly harmful this is to both human health and wildlife. Other cities that have woken up to this concern have gone back to a 4,000 to 4,200 Kelvin lighting, which is much more conducive to people being outdoors. There's a propane farm on Allen Street that the city has grown around. Back in 90, oh God, when was it? 90, I think it was 99, right around there, maybe 2000. Some idiot put a pipe bomb down at Province House and they put one at the propane farm. Fortunately, the one at the propane farm did not go off. I was working in the planning department at the time, and if it had gone off, it could have sent a fireball all the way down to the waterfront and all the way to the top of Mount Edward Road. There's been numerous times that this has been brought up where that propane farm should be moved. Modern propane farms, when they're built now, are either in a valley or a berm around them, so if there is an accident, the explosion goes up rather than out. Cavendish Farms has a fertilizer warehouse. It's huge, right on the waterfront. I think we all remember what Timothy McVeigh did to a major office building with a van full of fertilizer. Maybe that fertilizer plant should be moved out of town as well. There's lots of efforts and incentives province-wide and in the city to put, to electrify our homes and to have solar panels on our roofs. But this city, I would suspect that 70–80% of the houses don't have good solar exposure. The city of Summerside, which is actually considered one of the greenest cities in all of Canada, has a major wind farm and a major solar farm. I would suggest that in your plan that you compete with the city of Summerside to be the greenest city in at least Prince Edward Island and have a solar farm that makes a whole lot more sense for community in a city rather than sticking solar panels on everybody's roof. Have you talked about water permeable driveways and parking lots? Okay, when we get a heavy rain in Charlottetown, like it doesn't take much rain for downtown to flood, and they start sandbagging, the underground parking lots by the Delta Hotel and whatnot. If we had green roofs like bylaws in the city of Toronto have, or if we had water permeable parking lots, we would alleviate a lot of that trouble. Interestingly enough, there's been some talk here about the cruise ships and the cruise ship industry. And I think I've heard debates on both sides about the true economic impact that they do have. I don't know whether they do or not. I do know that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change just issued a report today saying how incredibly, we're on thin ice and the ice is melting very quickly, was the quote I heard on the radio. Cruise ships have an incredible ecological footprint, and we need to do something about them. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate all of your kind of very environmentally minded questions. So we've actually run over time, so we're going to conclude the Q&A portion for now. But if anyone does have any questions, there are those of us in the room who have the buttons on. If you want to find us and ask any questions, there's also 3 more of these this week if you want to come out and learn a little bit more and talk more with us. So thank you all so much for coming out. We really appreciate all of your time and your thoughtful questions and your feedback. So thank you again.